we're going to be looking at formative assessment 1. You need to choose a topic of your choice or a topic that's listed here to help you. Once you've chosen that, you then write out a plan for your research. Now this includes your topic, your objectives, and the scope of your research, and how long it will take for you to do your research, as well as the methods you're going to use. You then also need to look at your sources of information. You need to know who's your target audience, and that will be, for example, are you presenting this to management team? Are you presenting it to your own team as manager? What presentation method will you use? Is it going to be a report? Is it going to be a brochure? Is it going to be a poster? Is it going to be verbal? And the type of computer application that you would use to analyze the data, the easiest actually would be the Excel graphs. You could do analyze data there, just looking at graphs and presenting that as your findings and recommendations. So let's now just go through a little bit more in terms of what do these actually mean? How do you actually plan your research? So let us look, for example, at research strikes in South Africa, which seems to have taken the headlines this last year. The topic's very broad. So first of all, you're going to decide, are you going to do the last year? Are you going to do it over the last 15 years? So you've got to decide on a time span. Then you decide whether your research strikes will be in all business sectors, for example, the mining sector, or only those, in other words, all sectors, steelwork, government, or just mines, for example. Then you've got to look at the next part, the scope of your research. And here we determine the amount of time you're going to need to finish your topic. For example, if you're going to look over the last 100 years of strikes, you're going to need a lot more time than just doing it over the last 20 years or even over the last year. And then you've got to determine what are your objectives. Do you want to achieve the factors that cause strikes, so that you can get recommendations on how to prevent these in the future? Or do you want to do research on businesses so that you can show statistics showing how strikes are very harmful to business? Or do you want to research the effect that strikes have on communities where strikers, for example, don't have any income and will resort to violence and criminal activities? So this really is your target market, and will give you a very good idea as to where to start your research. Once you've done this, you then have to find out what time you'd like to spend on your research. For example, do you want to for example, work solidly for a day, or do you want to set a timetable where you'll do a little bit at a time? It's very important for you to do a timetable so that you know exactly that you're going to meet your deadlines. And then you've got to look at your research methods. So are you going to gather information from your business, from correspondence, from written sources, from books, from the internet, or even surveys where you can get information from actual answers that people, current opinions that people have? So the best way really is to use as many methods as you can, because that will give you the most accurate and the most unique way of knowing the topic. And once you do that, the information and data then will be relevant and will be valid to what you're trying to show. So first going to look, if you want to look at a survey, for example, you need to first of all determine what is the aim of the survey. Identify what is your population group in the sample that you're going to be using. How many replies are you going to get? Are you going to get them by phone, by mail, or verbally? What sort of questionnaire? You need to then design your questionnaire. So the survey, when you send a survey, you have to decide, are you going to design it the way that I'll show you? I've designed a survey with forms in the form format. You want to ask specific questions so that you can collect specific information, and also you've got to relate that to your actual research as well, so that you can analyze the data and make it relevant to your research. And then you also got to look at your target audience. For example, part of your research planning must include, is it going to be a big corporate business that you're sending it to? Is it going to be a union member? Is it a trade union? Is it an employee? Is it for school children? Is it general public? Is it for your boss? Is it for the board meeting? And obviously determining the audience will determine the research. You are obviously going to do different research for different audiences. And once you've determined that, you then determine your method. How are you going to present it? Is it going to be in the form of a report? Is it going to be a PowerPoint presentation? Is it going to be an article? Are you going to, for example, do a newspaper article? And also, of course, what sort of computer applications are you going to use to analyze that data and the results of the research for your presentation? A nice thing, as I said, is graphs and using spreadsheet application or slides in a PowerPoint presentation also are very, very impactful. So getting started then with the actual formative assessment, I'm going to show you what I've started to do. So here is a questionnaire that I've put together in the format of a form. So you cannot click on anything else other than what you want them to click on, which are the boxes below. I'm trying to get information about electronic documents in terms of Microsoft Word so that I can then find out exactly what areas in Microsoft Office, for example, in Word, are the most frequently used and the ones that are most understood, etc. And so I start off with a very simple question: how old are you? And how old is your manager? What method of information transfer does your manager use most frequently? Okay. How does your manager present information? I'll go through the type of documents that he might want to use, and how well does he know the software that he uses, for example, if it's PowerPoint or if it's email, or if it's Word. Also, how advanced is the organization in regard to technology. And then what I ask is, this is the important part which can be then used as part of the analysis, is the type of word processing features that you would use the most frequently. For example, maybe you're going to be using spelling and grammar. You might use style a lot. You might use tables. But only use a maximum of 5, so you get the 5 most used. Probably like a page formatting, maybe a mail merge. And then you get to the next one, which ones do you find the most useful? And these, of course, are different from the ones that are used the most frequency. For example, you might not use mail merge, and these are most useful. And also you might find that referencing when it comes to research is very useful, as well as the templates to start off with, headers and footers, and style. In fact, copy and paste. And then what's the next thing the person would then answer is, which functions would they never use? In other words, things that they wouldn't even know how to use. Maybe how to track a change they might not know, or how to use a form and a control, or a hypertext, or etc. And then how do you and your company make use of templates? Do they? Yes or no? And then how often do you use a certain style? So essentially, once you've put together this, you've then got an idea of the type of questions that the type of questions and answers that are going to help you. Then you're going to go to your actual document. Now I've put together also a document as well. And here what I do is I've called the title "The Value of Word Processing in the Workplace." I felt that was very apt. Do people use it? How do they use it? And what value do they find in it? And so I'll start off. I'm doing it in the form of a report, the research. And so what I then do is I look, how important is it in the workplace today? What's the value thereof? Okay, so the first part really is putting the plan together, understanding what sort of questions you're going to ask, what sort of value, and also the sort of sources that you're going to be looking at. Again, to show you the sort of sources you're going to be looking at, for example, newspaper articles, obviously internet. And when you do reference internet or any of these things, you need to reference them when you access that particular website, for example. And if it's an article or a book, obviously put the name of the book and the author, etc. And that will be very helpful. So that's really getting the start, the planning part, before we get to the actual research part, which is now the second formative assessment. You are obviously going to choose your own title, your own area of expertise, the area that you want to work in, you want to look at memos, or you want to look at you want to look at Twitter. Any technical areas you're welcome to use, as long as you have a target audience, as long as you've used all the areas as before that are required.